You get nothing. Your brother deserves it all, Mom declared at the lawyer's office, her voice cutting through the mahogany-scented air like a verdict already decided. Dad nodded proudly beside her, his hand resting on my brother Kevin's shoulder as if crowning the family's golden child. I sat in silence, my fingers tracing the worn leather of Grandma's prayer book in my purse, the only thing they'd let me keep, while the probate judge cleared his throat and uttered words that would shatter everything they thought they knew. Actually, there's a second will. The estate valued at $34 million goes entirely to. But let me take you back to where this story truly began. My grandmother, Eleanor Victoria Ashford, was the kind of woman who wore pearls to garden and quoted Shakespeare while making her famous apple pie. She'd built her fortune quietly, investing in real estate across New England during the 1970s when everyone told her a widow had no business handling money. By the time I was born, she owned 17 properties, a small hotel in Vermont, and a portfolio of blue-chip stocks that she managed herself from her study filled with leather-bound books and the scent of lavender. I was the only grandchild who visited her without being forced. Every Sunday, while my brother Kevin played video games and complained about the boring old house, I sat with Grandma Eleanor in her garden. She taught me about compound interest while we pruned roses. She explained property valuations while we baked cookies. She shared stories of how she'd survived my grandfather's death with 2 young children and turned $12,000 in life insurance into an empire. Margot, she told me once, her weathered hands cupping my face, they'll underestimate you because you're quiet. Let them. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. I was 15 when she said that. I didn't fully understand until much later. My parents made no secret of their preference for Kevin. He was loud, charming, and confident, everything I wasn't. He played football, dated cheerleaders, and had the kind of easy smile that made teachers forgive missing homework and coaches overlook poor grades. I was the daughter who read too much, spoke too little, and preferred numbers to people. Kevin will run a company someday, Dad would say at dinner. He's got leadership qualities. Margot can be his accountant, Mom would add, laughing. Someone needs to do the boring work. I never argued. I just finished my homework early and drove myself to Grandma's house while they attended Kevin's games. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents missed the ceremony because Kevin had a playoff game 3 towns over. Grandma Eleanor sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. She took me to dinner afterward at the nicest restaurant in Hartford. I'm proud of you, she said, pressing an envelope into my hands. This is for your future. Don't tell your parents. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note that said, plant seeds they see, harvest when they least expect. I used that money wisely. While Kevin flunked out of his first college and transferred to an easier program, I graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with a degree in finance. While he bounced between failed business ideas funded by our parents, I quietly built a consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses secure funding. My parents never asked about my work. They assumed I was a secretary somewhere. Margot's doing something with papers, Mom would tell relatives. Kevin's about to launch his big venture. Very exciting. Kevin's big venture was a cryptocurrency scheme that lost $200,000 of our parents' retirement savings. They blamed the market, not him. When I offered to help them recover financially, Dad laughed. Sweetheart, leave the money stuff to the men. Why don't you find a nice husband instead? I was 29 years old with a net worth of $2.3 million. I said nothing. Grandma Eleanor passed away on a Tuesday in October, 3 weeks after her 91st birthday. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. Kevin didn't make it to the hospital. He was stuck in traffic for 6 hours from 20 minutes away. The funeral was beautiful. I organized everything because Mom was too distraught and Dad was handling the business side. Kevin showed up late, gave a speech about how Grandma always believed in him, and left early to meet friends. I stayed until the last guest departed, then drove to Grandma's empty house and sat in her garden until sunrise. 2 weeks later, we gathered at the offices of Whitmore and Associates for the reading of the will. The conference room smelled like old money and fresh coffee. Gerald Whitmore, Grandma's attorney for 30 years, sat at the head of a mahogany table that probably cost more than my first car. My parents flanked Kevin on one side, a united front of expectation. I sat alone on the other side, still wearing the black dress from a grief that hadn't lifted. Let's begin, Gerald said, adjusting his glasses. He looked uncomfortable, though I couldn't understand why at the time. Before we read the will, I should mention that Mrs. Ashford left specific instructions for this meeting. He pressed a button on his phone. She asked that Judge Harrison preside over any disputes. Dad frowned. Disputes? There won't be any disputes. Eleanor was very clear about her wishes. Mom nodded vigorously. She always said Kevin was the future of this family. She wanted him to have the means to succeed. Gerald's expression remained neutral. Nevertheless, Judge Harrison is joining us as a precaution. A door opened, and an older black man in a gray suit entered. Judge William Harrison had a reputation in Connecticut probate courts for being thorough, impartial, and impossible to manipulate. He nodded politely and took a seat near the window. "Please proceed, Gerald," he said. Gerald opened a folder. The last will and testament of Eleanor Victoria Ashford, dated March 15, 2019. He began reading the standard legal language: sound mind, revocation of previous wills, appointment of executors. My mother tapped her fingers impatiently. Kevin checked his phone under the table. Then Gerald reached the bequests. "To my grandson, Kevin Michael Ashford, I leave my collection of vintage watches, valued at approximately $45,000, in hopes that he will learn to value time as much as I did." Kevin's face fell. "Watches? That's it?" Mom's hand shot up. "There must be a mistake." "Eleanor promised, please let me continue," Gerald said firmly. "To my son, Richard Ashford, and his wife, Deborah, I leave the sum of $100,000, which I hope they will use wisely, unlike the numerous loans I provided over the years that were never repaid." Dad's face turned red. "This is outrageous. She can't." Judge Harrison raised a hand. "Mr. Ashford, please allow the reading to complete." Gerald took a breath. "To my granddaughter, Margot Elizabeth Ashford, I leave." He paused. The room went silent. "The remainder of my estate, including all real property, investment accounts, business holdings, and personal effects, with a current estimated value of $34.2 million, to be held in trust until she reaches the age of 30 or upon my death, whichever comes later." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then my mother exploded. "Absolutely not." Mom shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is fraud. Margot manipulated her. Eleanor would never. You get nothing." She turned to me, her finger pointing like a weapon. "Your brother deserves it all. He was her favorite. Everyone knows that." Dad nodded proudly beside her, his hand gripping Kevin's shoulder. "Eleanor always said Kevin reminded her of my father. She wanted the family legacy to continue through him. This will is obviously forged." Kevin finally looked up from his phone, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "Grandma said I'd be taken care of. She promised." "She took care of you for 32 years, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since entering the room. Every failed business. Every bounced check. Every time you needed just a little help to get back on your feet. She took care of you. She just stopped enabling you." "How dare you?" Mom started. Judge Harrison stood. "That's enough." His voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to silencing rooms. "Mr. Whitmore, is there anything else?" Gerald's uncomfortable expression deepened. "Actually, yes." Mrs. Ashford anticipated resistance to her wishes. "She left a video statement to be played in the event of any contest to the will." Mom laughed bitterly. "A video? How convenient. Probably doctored by Margot's tech friends." "The video was recorded in my office," Gerald said coolly. "Witnessed by myself, Judge Harrison, and 2 independent attorneys. It was sealed and stored in our vault since 2019. He turned a laptop screen toward the table and pressed play. Grandma Eleanor appeared on screen, sitting in the same conference room where we now gathered. She wore her favorite blue cardigan and the pearl necklace my grandfather had given her 50 years earlier. Her eyes were sharp, clear, and aimed directly at the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm dead, and someone is contesting my will. I bet my entire estate, which I suppose I'm doing, that it's Richard and Deborah making a fuss on behalf of Kevin." Mom's jaw dropped. Grandma continued. "Let me be perfectly clear, since clarity was never my son's strong suit. Kevin is not my favorite grandchild. He was never my favorite grandchild. I tolerated his visits because family obligations demanded it, and I supported his ventures because my son begged me to. Every dollar I gave Kevin was a dollar I watched burn." Kevin made a choking sound. "Margot, on the other hand, is the only person in this family who ever saw me as more than a bank account. She visited because she wanted to. She listened because she cared. She learned because she was hungry in the way that builds empires, not the way that consumes them." Grandma leaned forward in the video, her gaze intensifying. "But that's not why she's getting everything. Sentiment is lovely, but I'm a businesswoman. Margot is getting my estate because she's the only one capable of growing it. While Kevin was losing money on schemes he didn't understand, Margot built a company worth millions without any help from this family. She did it quietly, without bragging, without asking for recognition. That's the kind of person who deserves to steward a legacy." She sat back, her expression softening. "Richard, Deborah, I love you because you're my family, but I don't trust you with money. You've proven that 100 times over. The $100,000 I've left you is more than generous, Considering you still owe me $340,000 in loans you've conveniently forgotten. Dad's face went white. Kevin, the watches are valuable. Sell them, invest the money wisely, and maybe you'll learn something. Or don't. That's your choice now. Grandma's eyes found the camera again, and I could have sworn she was looking directly at me. Margot, my darling girl. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this while I was alive. I didn't want to burden you with their jealousy before you had to carry it. But you were always the one. From the moment you asked me how compound interest worked at age 8, I knew you'd be the one to carry this forward. Don't let them make you feel guilty. Don't let them convince you that you stole something that was always meant to be yours. She smiled, the same warm smile I remembered from Sunday afternoons in her garden. Plant seeds they can't see. Harvest when they least expect. I love you. The screen went black. The silence in the conference room was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat, the distant hum of traffic outside, the soft whir of the building's ventilation system. Mom found her voice first. This doesn't prove anything. She was clearly senile. We'll contest this in court. We'll get doctors to testify. Mrs. Ashford, Judge Harrison interrupted, his voice carrying a note of finality. I witnessed Eleanor Ashford record that statement. I spoke with her for 2 hours that day about her intentions, her reasoning, and her mental state. I also reviewed her medical records, financial documents, and correspondence with her family going back 20 years. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I've presided over hundreds of estate cases. Eleanor Ashford was one of the sharpest minds I've ever encountered. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did it with meticulous care precisely because she anticipated this reaction. He turned to me. Miss Ashford, the estate is yours. My office will expedite the probate process. Given the video evidence and documentation, I don't anticipate any successful challenges. Gerald nodded. I'll have the transfer documents ready within the week. Mom started crying. Dad stared at the table like it had personally betrayed him. Kevin still hadn't moved, his phone forgotten in his lap. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady but my voice clear. I'm sorry this isn't what you expected, I said. But Grandma made her choice. I intend to honor it. I walked toward the door, then paused. Kevin, for what it's worth, those watches are worth more than $45,000. Grandma collected rare pieces. The Patek Philippe alone could fund a modest investment portfolio if you're smart about it. I turned to my parents. The $100,000 she left you is enough to pay off your mortgage and start fresh. You could retire comfortably if you're careful. I hope you consider that instead of spending it on lawyers who will only take your money and lose anyway. Dad finally looked up. You planned this. You manipulated her against her own family. I visited her, I replied. That's all I did. I showed up when no one else would. I listened when no one else cared. If that's manipulation, then I guess I'm guilty. I opened the door. Margot, wait, it was Kevin, his voice cracking. I never thought. He trailed off, unable to finish. I know, I said. That's the problem. You never thought. I drove to Grandma's house, my house now, and sat in the garden until sunset. The roses she'd planted 40 years ago still bloomed every spring, tended by a gardener she'd employed for decades and whose salary I'd continue to pay. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't read. Voicemails piled up from numbers I didn't answer. The world outside that garden wanted things from me, explanations, apologies, pieces of a fortune I'd never expected. But in that moment, surrounded by the roses Grandma Eleanor had taught me to prune, I understood something she'd tried to tell me my entire life. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The ones who inherit the earth aren't the ones who demand it, they're the ones who quietly make themselves worthy of it. I pulled out the prayer book from my purse, the one I'd been clutching during the reading. A folded note fell from between its pages, written in Grandma's elegant cursive. My dearest Margot, if you're reading this, the circus has concluded and you're probably sitting in my garden wondering what happens next. Here's my answer, whatever you want. Build something magnificent. Help people who deserve it. Fall in love with someone who sees your quiet strength as the treasure it is. Live loudly or softly, but live on your own terms. They'll tell you that you didn't deserve this. Ignore them. You earned it with every Sunday visit, every genuine conversation, every moment you chose presence over performance. I love you. I always did. Now go prove what I already knew. Forever yours, Grandma Eleanor. I folded the note carefully and placed it back in the book. The sun had fully set now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Grandma would have called God showing off. Somewhere across town, my family was probably meeting without me, planning their next move, rehearsing their grievances. Let them. They could have the anger, the resentment, the righteous indignation. I had roses to tend and seeds to plant. And 34 million reasons to prove my grandmother right.